Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and those of you still on the fence, welcome back to another episode of Derailed, courtesy of Archaic Skids. I'm, of course, your host, Archaic Skids. We have our beautiful co-host, Martha Bueno. And I am so excited about this guest, but I don't know how to say her name properly, so we're going to let Martha introduce her.
So today we have Maylene Salavarria from Havana, Cuba, which I'm so excited to meet you.
That would be me
too. Because we go back and forth on Twitter a lot.
Very nice to meet you both, and thanks again for the invitation to have me on the show. This is going to be really exciting.
I am very excited to have you on the show. We've been working on this, almost a month now to get you on the show?
Yeah, trying to coordinate schedules, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, after she, of course, when you DM someone, we were discussing in pre-show, when a guy DMs a woman on Twitter, they're a little reluctant, kind of,
Yeah, a couple of filters to go through first before giving any answer.
Right, that makes sense to me. I mean, as much as it can, because I don't have that issue on Twitter, which is nice. When people
you all the time?
No, people DM me. It's just like, oh, you're a racist. I want to kill you. I hope your family dies. Stuff like that.
Oh, my God.
Then it's just blocked.
Isn't that business as usual anyway nowadays?
And basically, yeah. As you put it, Twitter's a dumpster fire. I've heard it referred to as a septic tank.
Yeah. So. See, I was trying to give it a ladylike,
If you ever watched any of my interviews or shows we've done, that's not a thing on this channel.
Good. So we can
say whatever we want.
We can go full Cuban with the real words, let's just let him know exactly what we think, right?
We're just gonna let everyone know that we're taking over this show. Today is Cuban Chick Day, and sorry, you're just on the sidelines here.
Yeah.
Apologize.
Technical support when needed.
Right on. Maylene, why don't you introduce yourself to people who maybe don't follow you on Twitter, which, by the way, everyone should. Her Twitter handle is in the description below, so click on that, give her a follow. But just tell people who you are, where you come from, and what got you here to this moment, this interview.
Oh, well, I'm Maylene Salavarria, just a simple Cuban girl trying to make a life for myself and my family in the United States. As I told you both a couple of days ago, I have been here in the United States for 20 years now, believe it or not. I blink and 20 years went through. I was born and raised in Havana, Cuba. I left Cuba in 2001 at age 27. No math allowed about my age, okay? I have a law degree from Havana University and a Master of Science in Journalism and Mass Communication from Florida International University. I have been in Colorado since 2004, so Colorado is home for me. This is where my kids were born. This is where I brought my parents when I was able to get them out of Cuba. I am also a professional interpreter and translator. I did that work for almost 10 years. Until I decided to take a leap of faith and open my own business. I am now a small business owner. Yes, I am a woman leading a contracting job in construction and commercial construction building industry. It's a small family business, and my dad works with me still. I, again, live in Northern Colorado for almost 15 years now. I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I, on a daily basis, need to unschool the boy, and I homeschool the youngest one. All that while trying to care for my parents, keep my mental sanity, and like I told you, remembering to floss, because for some reason that seems to be important.
Well, that's Vermin Supreme. That's Vermin Supreme's thing. So I guess it's a libertarian thing to remind people to floss. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I heard that for the first time. It was I spent 2 years in South Carolina, and this girl that we're social media friends to, she lived in Jones Island, pretty close to where I was. When I first read her bio, I was just laughing nonstop because they have a small farm, and we were talking about, because she saw my car and she saw the stickers that I have in my car, and she was like, "You're probably the only other libertarian that I know in this area." And then that's how our relationship started. And she just cracked me up when I read everything that she said about, taking care of her girls, their little farm, raising chickens, the lizards, and remembering to floss. And I'm like, what does that have anything to do with? And then it's one of those things that just sticks in your head for like forever.
The libertarian way. We all have to have nice teeth.
I guess, yeah.
that seems to be.
That's the short form of who I am here in Colorado for the past 6 years. Also, I have been involved with the leadership program of the Rockies, which I am a graduate from the class of 2016. I am also decided to stay working with the organization in the advisory board after my graduation. And that was what kind of like prompted me into starting to do these speaking engagements about, politics, public policy, community situations, and basically trying to tie my experience of life under Castro's Cuba with all the red flags that I have been seeing and calling off since I came to this country in 2001. And just as a disclaimer, no, I am not from any rich family that ran away from Batista or anything like that. I'm just the daughter of my mom and my dad, and I was born and raised in Castro's Cuba. Actually, Fidel Castro died after I have been here for quite a few years. I was probably the only crazy person driving on Main Street, Windsor, honking an American and a Cuban flag the day that Castro died a few years ago. So that, just to put it out there, I mean, if we're going to start the name callings, at least let's get some substance behind it, right?
So I want to know how you left Cuba, because this story, I'm always fascinated by how Cubans leave, because it's always a story.
It is. Like I told Austin a couple of days ago, it's like every time that you talk to someone that has been able to leave Cuba, I can guarantee that we have stories to write an entire book per family. Yep. For you, Martha, that you are in Miami, you probably have to have heard about the amnesics, like the Cubans that come with amnesia. It's basically like a joke or a way to say that how we came here when the Cuban Adjustment Act was still in place, before D.R. Obama gave it away to hell in a basket case when he went to Cuba and gifted it to Raul Castro. And so it was part of what you were referencing before in that policy of dry food, wet food. It's just that instead of coming in a raft, I came in a plane. So it was like the airplane version of the dry food, wet food policy when the Cuban Adjustment Act was still in place back in 2001. So I kind of like went to the entire process of being on probation for 101 day, where they would give you like a temporary work permit, and then you needed to start doing English classes or get some sort of like vocational training, prove that you had a job, that you didn't have any criminal records. And then after 100 days and 101 day, then you could apply for the permanent residency, again, with all the money and the process that carries. And then from there, it's just like everybody else. You can be a legal resident for 5 years. And then after that, you start the whole thing all over again to apply for the naturalization. You have to do the civic test and go through all that. So I became an American citizen in 2009 when I was already living here in Colorado.
Wow, that is like a process.
We left Cuba. Back then in 2001, you had to have an invitation permit from someone already living abroad for the Cuban government to allow you to leave the island. Because you got to remember, I mean, the way that you have to picture it in your head is like the island is a plantation, and there is no way that any operative slave can leave the plantation without the owner's authorization. That changed quite a few years ago, but this is what I'm telling you, how it was the process when I left. So the minute that you submitted to the Cuban government the application to go out and visit someone for 3 months, because that was the standard tourist visa back then, you have to quit your job the same day that you presented that application. And the government could take any time to give you a response. In our case, it was almost 1 year that we were unemployed. My then husband and myself, we didn't have any kids back then, unemployed, being supported by the family of his already abroad, waiting for the government to let us know, yes, you can go for 3 months to Europe or not. So we were supposedly to go to a wedding in Holland. They're still waiting for me to come back. I mean, good, so...
Yeah, that's basically that's the reason my father was put in jail, because again, it's a plantation, and if you dare leave, you're can be put in jail. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. I have many friends, many close relatives that they tried to live in rafts, and they were caught by the Cuban Coast Guard, and then they were thrown in jail. 40 years was attempt to illegally leave the island. That's the code in the criminal code in Cuba. At the same time that it was the same thing, it was illegal to own or possess any type of foreign currency. So they were both going tied together.
So you said that you needed to apply to go to a wedding, you said, is what you said? And they make you quit your job when you do that. The Cuban government makes you quit your job?
The Cuban government, yes.
Is there a reason that they do that? Why would they have you quit your job? Well, if you're saying, well, I'm just going to go to this wedding and then I come back, is it because they know that you're not coming back?
There were a combination of things. And usually it plays a role. I was working in tourism. So I was working in one of the restaurants that is already owned by the company, which is like the front store by the army that owns all the hotels and everything in Cuba. So that played a role. I don't think in my case it was from the professional standpoint. When I graduated from law school, I actually graduated on December of 2000 and I left Cuba on January 21st of 2001. So I was literally waiting to get my diploma and my transcripts so I could leave. I never registered with what it would have been the equivalent of the board when you become an attorney here in the United States, because the minute I would do that, I would be in the professional government's database and they would have never let me leave. Not even to attend a wedding and actually come back if that was my true intention. But that was the policy back then, because the minute that someone applied to leave either temporarily or permanently the island, you were immediately blacklisted as a traitor. You do not belong to these new men that we're trying to create. And whatever else you want to throw in there in that twisted logic that they apply for those things.
It's crazy. I was going to ask you, so you didn't actually work as an attorney in Cuba, but
no,
I'm sure you knew attorneys in Cuba. What is it like to be an attorney in a country where there's no laws?
It is a nightmare. It is a nightmare, and that was kind of like the cherry on the top of my awakening process when I was in Cuba, because you got to remember, like, I went to government-controlled schools in Cuba from third grade until I graduated from college. So obviously at the beginning, I would say roughly until I finished high school, I was still brainwashing to thinking that disaster was literally the last Coca-Cola in the desert, and it was after I reached that age that I started in the university, actually studying in law school, when I started seeing in my head the contradictions and then the personal experiences. Granted, that's around the same time where teenagers back then, you were out of the boarding schools and you were on a daily basis with your family and seeing your family struggle more than when you were in that boarding school that you were 2 weeks in school, surrounded by government teachers and a government system.
Who don't know, because you're talking to me, but I think you need to
explain. Okay, I don't know. How do you explain boarding school? I mean,
but it's not in America. If you say a boarding school, it's like your parents have money and they sent you to a boarding school, which is a nice place.
Oh, no.
So you have to explain.
No, it's like the opposite. Boarding school, I use the term like very loosely. Boarding school is when you're not sleeping in your house with your parents on a daily basis.
But it's government compelled.
Yeah, it was compelled until a few years ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, not that they changed that not that long ago, but it's still the choices not to be in that type of school are really not that many to begin with. So by default, most families are still doing the same. So basically, what I call boarding schools is like you will go to the school, let's say every Sunday afternoon, and you spend there and sleep there in dorms and all that. Like 1 week when we still had the pipeline from the Soviet Union, when things were kind of like not that dire. After that, they switched it to 2 weeks, which was like my last year and a half in high school. And then you would spend in your house with your family just a weekend, a 3 or 4 days weekend. So just imagine you're a mom, you have kids too. Imagine that age of middle and high school, where you need your family nuclear environment and your parental guidance the most. that's when they put you aside, and that's where you are in that boarding school where your supervisors are teachers and people who are not related to you or your family, where you are in dorms with, I don't know, 300 other kids, or hormones raging, jumping off the walls left and right, and then being, brainwashed 24/7, literally. So yeah, that was and I was lucky. Like the middle school and high school where I was the so-called, like the one for the privileges, where you either got in there by your grades, which was my case, because again, I'm just the daughter of my mom and my dad, or if you were, the privileged kids, from someone that was high ranking in the government, in the military, or something like that. I went to like El Pre Ciencias Exactas, La Lenin, which is the program or the curriculum that we have there. It's my generation was probably the last one that had it. It was a classical curriculum, and it would be the equivalent of a STEM program here that is focused on science. From seventh grade to 12th.
At least that one part, that educational part was good, minus the Lenin and Marxist.
Exactly. Well, yes, that part. But again, you cannot see that in a vacuum, because I cannot see that as like, oh yeah, that was great, I have free education. No, I had cousins my age that were not in that school, and their experiences in those boarding schools were night and day and night.
Yeah.
And the other thing that played a big role, that even in the same school, like the kids and generations that came after me, even from a pure educational standpoint, it was different, because my generation was the last that the teachers were educated as teachers prior to 1959. So that's why they were able to carry a classical model in the curriculum. Like the kids that came after me, their teachers were the ones that were already prepared as educators in Castro's indoctrination mill. So the whole point of how the curriculum, even within a STEM focus school, was completely different. And right now, just everything went to hell in a basket case. It's not even focused on STEM anymore. Actually, the school is just in ruin. It's just falling down. Literally, the building is falling down.
Did you have to?
I'm going to jump in for just a second and let the viewers that are watching, one specifically, and he should know who he is. If you ask questions like that, you will immediately be blocked, and you will not be allowed to speak in the chat. So y'all just keep that.
I want to know what that comment was.
Yeah,
well, it's blocked.
I see it. Oh, you blocked it.
Blocked.
Okay.
Yeah. It's ridiculous, and I won't have it. So.
All right.
Sorry about interrupting there. Go ahead with your question.
So I wanted to know, did you have to accept, in order to get your diploma, you said that you were waiting for your diploma of law school. Did you have to accept, like, did you have to claim to be a communist, like part of the party, to get your diploma, or is that not a thing anymore?
Well, not directly, but subliminally, yes. I mean, the other thing that I think was like a big advantage for me is that back then in Cuba, remember, we're talking about 2000. No, actually, I started law school in 1993. No internet, no computers. So I did my entire career in law school in what would be the equivalent of the online distance education here. So like I was homeschooled from kindergarten to 3rd grade in the middle of the desert in Libya, which is like another side story. I digress. When homeschooling was not even a thing. And then it's funny because a couple of days ago, talking to my son, we end up realizing I did my entire law school under the same model. So even though I was attending conferences, in person and all that, my whole curriculum and all that was self-guided. And the reason why I had to do that, let me tell you this, is because when I finished 12th grade high school in Cuba, I was like top ranking on my grades and all that. So supposedly you should be able to pick whichever career in college or university you want. It doesn't work like that. They create their list, because students graduating from 12th grade, they need to have their positive reassurance about their GPAs and all that. But then you get to write in a paper. I think in my case it was like 5 choices or 3 choices of which careers you wanted to do in university, like higher education. And it's the Ministry of Education, as known as the government, the one that tells you which one you get to study. So my top choice was journalism. Obviously, I already had started building a reputation of being a rabble rouser, so I knew that one was not going to fly very good. And on top of that, in Cuba, for you to go to journalism school, you really need to be the son of the daughter of someone that is already in the network of the government media. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. And back then, there was no internet, no social media, no independent citizen journalism like we have studied now. Remember, we're talking about 20 years ago. So that was my first choice. My second choice was law school. And then my third choice was to go into this institute that they call the ISPL, which is the one where you go to study English so you are able to become an English teacher. Okay. They didn't give me any of those. They sent me like, what was the name of it was like something in agriculture. I mean, no offense to the farmers or people that I admire, but it was just not my calling. It was not my vocation. So I very politely declined. And then when that happens, you only have two choices. You had very limited choices to do these self-guided higher education careers, or you just go to work and become like an ostracized person, like, oh my God, you didn't go to the university, blah, whatever. Right? So one of the 3 or 4 choices that were left in that self-guided distance education program was law school. So I'm like, okay, this was one of mine. So I'm, por aquí que es más seca, I'm going to go this way.
I'll be right back, Martha. Keep her talking. This is awesome.
I will.
So, so I think that's one of the reasons why I think in my case was not that. Like, for example, I have good friends from high school that they went to law school in the regular program, and yes, they're still stuck there.
Of course, they can't leave. But so what do they say? What do they do every day? What is law in Cuba? What does it look like?
It's a nightmare. Like, I mean, I have like very few examples. When I was going to law school, like my favorite topics were always like everything that has to do with the history of law and all that. I actually wanted, if I stay there, I wanted to, after I graduate, continue teaching in law school. But things like when you start studying constitutional law and criminal law and the penal code, and then I was reading this and I'm like, do these people really think that I am that idiot? Like what they're writing in the paper about natural rights and this and that, this is not what is happening in real life around me. So it was in those years where I had this huge awakening. Many things happened in those years. Around the same time, it was when we have the tugboat massacre of the 13 de Marzo, tugboat that Raúl Castro sent to sink right there in the Havana harbor. It was the whole disaster with Elian Gonzalez. It was the Maleconazo when people took the streets in the Malecon, and Fidel Castro took the tanks out right there in the middle of Havana to crush the people that were on the streets. It was when we have the rafters crisis of 93, 94 during the Clinton administration. So all those things happened at the same time that I was literally reading in my course of studies, like, okay, well, like this is like the capitalistic way, and this is the socialistic, and this is the eclectic. And I'm like, people, there is no amount of mental gymnastics that you can put in these textbooks that you can twist the nature of what is a natural law right or what is an individual right and things like that. I mean, granted, back then, I haven't studied as much as I have now, and I hadn't learned the things that I learn now. So probably I wasn't able to articulate it or kind of like put it together in my head the way that I do it now. But something inside me was telling me that that didn't make any sense at all, especially when studying, what the books and the program tell you, and then you just get out and you see what's going on around you on the street.
So I think let's bring it down so that people can understand what we're talking about. So when you say bring out the tanks, how many people, do you know how many people were killed? And it's like, it resembled Tiananmen Square in China, right? Like
the thing is that I would dare, yeah, it was very similar. It was very similar. I would dare to say that probably nobody has real statistics. I actually can't remember. It was just crazy. I remember that was one afternoon that I was coming from being a listener in one of the conferences. And then when all that happened, your immediate instinct is just try to get in a bus and try to get to your house because you really never know. And then after that, what you see on the news is going to be the twisted story of what they want to tell you. Like a quick example, when the Tugboat massacre happened, I used to work in the restaurant that is right there in La Cabaña. And I mean, we were there and we witnessed what happened. It was in broad daytime when Raúl Castro asked the Cuban Coast Guard to sink a tugboat that has been, you don't kidnap vessels. What's the word? Taken, stolen, or whatever. And then several families were trying to live in that tugboat. I think
Cuban families were trying to escape Cuba.
Yeah, they were trying to escape Cuba. There is actually a book, although I read it in Spanish. I wonder if there is an English edition, but come on, guys, do your Googles. The information is somewhere out there already translated because this happened more than 20 years ago. So Raúl Castro ordered the Cuban Coast Guard to sink that tugboat, and 27 children were murdered by the Cuban government, and their only crime was that those families were trying to leave the island. Many of those survivors are now in Miami. There have been every year, there are several things that are organized to honor the memory of the children that were killed. Some of them were infants. So all that happens right there. And then we're in the restaurant. And then 2 days after that, we have the state security team coming in and have like this super secret special meeting with us and telling us what you saw is not what you saw. This is what happened. And I'm like, seriously? Like we were presential witnesses. Like we were literally standing in there and seeing what happened. And you're telling me that what I saw is not what I saw, that what happened is what you're telling me now? Like, come on, dude. Like, come on.
It's funny because we talk about the indoctrination of Cuba, but on this side, the indoctrination is real as well, because I bet you the vast majority of Americans have not heard that story.
But it's the same here. Are you kidding me? The same here is the same. It's just that we're more fancy now because we do it in English and we have Wi-Fi.
But exactly. But it's indoctrination the same. You don't hear these stories. So when I talk to people and I explain what it's like, what you said was exactly right. You are on a plantation. The entire country of Cuba is a plantation, and your plantation owner are the Castros.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And now even for people who ask, well, now that Castro is dead, or like his brother, gave away the power, since when plantation owners have been so, graceful? I mean, it's the same dog with a different leash. It's pretty much the same thing, just with another name. It's just another puppet. The problem and the whole sick and twisted centralized situation is the same.
I agree. I
don't think that people understand this about Cuba, and it's probably because we have people like Senator Bernie Sanders who, is, it's great there. What are you talking about? They got free education. I'm like, yeah. But now this is cursory study, obviously, on my part, and someone that's never been to Cuba would like to go one time if they're ever a free nation and you can go and like actually talk to people. But what Castro did in Cuba is essentially the exact same thing as is North Korea.
Yeah,
you're a slave to the government.
Mm-hmm.
You will do what you're told when you're told, no matter what. So to put it in perspective for anyone, North Korea and Cuba, it's the same situation.
It's the same. You can't even choose the career path you want to take, which is what Mylene just said.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't choose the education. Like, it's great that education is free, except
it's not.
Actually,
I beg to digress, because it is free, but do you guys just want to know what's the real cost of having free education?
Absolutely.
Now, what is the real cost of being controlled by the powers that be, of not being exposed to have like this ability to have critical thinking, to be given different point of view, and to develop your thinking and rhetorical skills to a point where you're able to make up your mind and to draw your own conclusions on your own? Is the same fallacy of the free healthcare. At what price? We have been paying for 62 years the highest price for the so-called free education and free healthcare. Like when you were mentioning Grandpa Bernie and Michael Moore with his documentary, none of those things, people, is the real life that I live in Cuba with my family. What Michael Moore showing that in that documentary was the hospital for the privileges of the Cuban government in Cuba and the clinic where the foreigners that have dollars go and receive the service and pay in hard currency. That's not the hospital where my dad almost died of a medical malpractice. That's not my hospital where one of my cousins right now is working as an OB doctor, wearing the scrubs and the shoes that the rest of the family that live outside of Cuba sent to her. That is not the hospital where children are dying of malpractices in Cuba. My cousin that is an OB a couple of years ago, they have like 24 kids, preemies dying in the ICU because the blackouts broke the respirators and those little kids didn't have, they didn't have the equipment in the incubators or anything like that. So when people say something like what you just said, Austin, like about, oh, I want to go to Cuba, and, some people genuinely ask when they know that I am from Cuba because they want to know. My first question always is, okay, you need to tell me which Cuba do you want to see?
Well, I want to see a free Cuba and go to that.
You have to approach it as a parallel reality, literally like if you were watching the movie The Matrix. It's exactly like that. So that's why I elaborate on my question, which Cuba do you want to see? Do you want to see the Cuba that they sell you in the posters, in Obama's baseball game, in the Kardashians' adventure, in Michael Moore's fallacy, the one that Bernie and AOC defend so much, while their bottoms are here in the United States, not living in an apartment like I live in Alamat? Or do you want to know the real Cuba where I live and grew up until I left in 2001? The Cuba where the average Cuban Joe is struggling to get, where you have water running in your pipes in your apartment only 1 hour a day, where you have to do endless lines to get the bread on rationing food, where you have the blackouts, where you have your freaking sanitary napkins on the rationing book, okay? You got an what is it? You got an odd cycle. Your problem, sister. You only get 30 a month. You are, bleeding after having a baby more than 30 days. Your problem, sister. This is what you get.
Oh wait, and there's not. What are your choices? It's just pads and pads and more pads.
You don't have choices.
Yeah.
You don't have. I mean, I don't know how PG rated we have to keep it, but
you don't.
Basically, you don't have choices, people. I never saw a tampon in my life until I came to this country. Like, are you freaking kidding me?
Speaking of that,
that's part of what I said when I was saying at the beginning that those first years in Miami was like living inside a washing machine, because literally your head is spinning like this. I was learning to use how to use a microwave. Okay, I was learning how to write a check, and I'm a visual learner. So for me, I had to wrap in my head the process that I work, I get paid with a check, I deposit the check in the bank, and then the bank give me a checkbook, and I write a check, and I pay the phone bill or the water bill. I mean, you literally, and that's why I was laughing when you say choices. When you leave a place like you at the moment that I left, you need, I would say, probably a good 5 years, because you need to learn how to be a free person. You need to know what choices are, and it's a learning curve. I remember going to the grocery store in Miami at first, let's say to get a toothpaste. I always use the example of the toothpaste because I grew up always having one tube of toothpaste under the rationing book, made in Russia, which, by the way, the flavor was disgusting. One every 3 months, and then I land here in Miami, and then I have to go to to do my groceries, and then I stand in that aisle of the grocery store with, I don't know, 275 different type of toothpaste, and I'm like, how do I know? How do I choose? Why? Because
anyone is better than the one you had. That's for sure.
Exactly. Even the one from the dollar store is probably going to be 10 times better. But I didn't know how a person live and decides when you have choices. I had to learn how to how to do that.
Imagine that. Imagine choices being the thing you have to learn to deal with. So when you were in Cuba and you had a headache, what would you take?
Well, aspirin if you were lucky to have it.
That's the thing, that I love how people tell us how healthcare is so wonderful in Cuba, and it's like, well, if you were lucky to have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but so when I was, I've been doing a lot of reading about Cuba, especially, in preparation. And I don't usually prepare for any interview. I just kind of wing it, and we just go for it. Hence the name. Hence the name of the show. It's called Derailed. But certain things are far more important to me, in making sure that they're represented correctly. And this is one of those situations. But in Cuba, I don't think that people, and it's because of like what you said, Michael Malice's fallacy, AOC, all these people that are like, no, it's great there. You don't understand. Free healthcare, if you require rationing in order to get it, I'd rather go bankrupt. Here, you might not be able to afford the healthcare, but your option of getting whatever necessary healthcare, you can get it. Now, will you maybe lose your house in the process? Possibly, but you won't lose your life.
Yeah.
That's not an option in Cuba. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's not an option in Cuba.
Yeah.
So
there's
that's
a video.
Go ahead.
There's a video of Bernie Sanders from way back when talking about Russian healthcare. And he says very clearly in the video, he's like, yeah, they're 10 years behind the United States, but it's free. And I'm thinking, imagine how many parents who have their kids in an ICU with brand new technology, and they're hoping and praying for that, for their child to survive. Imagine that you go in there and you go, hey, guess what? We can go back 10 years in technology and it'll be free. So you're basically choosing free or your kid's life. Which one do you think these parents are going to choose?
You know what is really, you know what is really rich about these people that say that kind of like idiocies? Because again, I have a few more word choices, but I try to keep it ladylike, is that they are from this bubble of the so-called 1% privilege that they love to hate. They have this holier than you attitude where they think that, oh yeah, we can go 10 years back in technology, because they're banking on the fact that they're going to remain in that elite. And this is this conversation that I always have with them, especially with people that want to shove down my throat this new repackaged socialism in the United States. Now it's like, have you processed in your head properly the fact that you might not end up in that elite? Are you going to be okay if you are in the other 98% that is going to be the regular average Joe whose life is going to be exactly as miserable as the one that I have in Cuba? Have you computed that properly in your head before you open your mouth to say the things that you're saying? They're not.
But that's because they believe that they're going to be in the privileged class. They believe in their own mind, I'm going to be one of the chosen ones, but you're not. There's 330 million people in America and 329 million that just props up
with the stories about healthcare. I tend to get like really, really defensive because it's something that touched me very personal. We have a lot of healthcare professionals in the family, both inside and outside of Cuba. And in 1992, my uncle was like in a late stage renal failure due to diabetes. Back in those years, obviously, and in Cuba, you didn't have the resources and the things that you have now. And I remember that my uncle was having to receive dialysis 3 times a week. And then there is like erythropoietin blood product that have to be put in the IV at the same time that you're getting the dialysis. And this was in the 90s crisis, the so-called special period after the Soviet Union cut the pipeline to support Castro and Cuba, and things got really dire there. It was my half brother and half sister who are Germans, and they also have healthcare people in the family. They were the ones sending that medication to Cuba so my uncle could get that. Like the day of his funeral, people, for crying out loud, the freaking funeral home car ran out of gas in the middle of the street where we were driving for the cemetery. And us, the worms, the traitors, the ones that are borderline counter-revolutionaries because we had already opened our eyes. We were the ones, surviving in the black market. We were the one who got the tanks in the back of our cars and siphoned the freaking funeral car to make it all the way to the cemetery. My dad.
Imagine, like, just put that into context for a minute.
I mean,
you're at a funeral for your uncle, and you need to get the gas. so that the
Yes.
funeral car can take his body to the
Yes.
cemetery.
Yes. I mean, just try to be on my shoes. And I was, how old? This was like in the first year of law school. So I was what, 18, maybe 18, 19. I can't remember now. Oh,
Amazing.
so yeah, it's that kind of like thing that people cannot even fathom. And then it's like this. I mean, them communists coined the name of useful idiots
Yes.
ago. I
And
mean,
we have a large
they
majority of
say
those.
that, and they say, well, yeah, it wasn't implemented, corrected, and all that garbage because they have never had to live it. And we have this saying in Spanish that says, es muy fácil nadar fuera del agua. It's very easy to swim when you're not in the water. So yes, it's very easy to spout all that idiocy from the comfort of your $500,000 house in Boulder when you're driving your car of the year, going to your overpriced university to get a college degree that is not going to render you any job when you're done. So yes, it's very easy to swim when you are out of the water, but then when you're in the middle of that, is a whole different ball game. And obviously, most people, when we talk about this, especially younger generation, I mean, I hate to stereotype people in groups, but, you know, sadly, it's what happens. I mean, they don't even have the mental acuity to engage in that type of critical thinking, let alone that require man parts or girl parts to stand and have a conversation of that nature. They don't. So
Right.
yeah, when the Boogaloo or the zombie apocalypse get here, they're the first ones that are going to be out of the game, like in a New York minute.
So let's go with some stereotypes of Cuba, because I love, you know, having a conversation with you about what are the stereotypes that bother you the most? So obviously the healthcare, the free healthcare and the free education, but what else? What else have people told you about it? You started off with saying that you don't come from a wealthy family. Your parents weren't plantation owners, because I get that one too.
Mm-hmm.
Often people be like, well, of course your father had to leave because Castro hated him because he was a plantation
owner. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, my mom was a secretary and my dad worked, he worked as an engineer, but it wasn't nothing out of the blue either. You know, my grandma's little family restaurant was confiscated when Castro abolished private property and private businesses in Cuba. And it was just like a little place in a small rural town. So I would say those are the biggest fallacies. Again, granted, you know, collectivists and progressives, not only in the United States and Cuba, all over the world, they have been working on this messaging of brainwashing and their wonders for decades now. Whoever thinks that this has to do with Castro in the last 60 years or the past two administrations in the United States is just not looking at the big picture. This has been in the works for decades now. So I would say those, or when people say about the cars, and I'm like,
oh,
they're
so
all
nice.
like, dude,
they're so nice. They're from the 50s. They're so
like, do you think that I'm doing that out of choice? No, I would be driving, heck, the Range Rover of the year, but I can't. You know, and it's kind of like this simplification of you know, thinking, and then assuming that everybody there, it's in there happy and we're just all dancing a big kumbaya.
I mean, you are all happy and you are all dancing.
I say that what bothers me the most is like blindly believing the story that the government have been putting out for the past 62 years. And we have to give the communists credit for it. I mean, they have put out the perfect PR campaign for over 60 years now. And people have been so gullible and so mentally lazy that they have bought it. They have swollen it completely. And then when someone dares to, you know, lift their head and try to say a story that is different, they immediately start labeling you and you know, and kind of like rejecting that because, oh, this is like the fancy story that I have believed for so many years, and I refuse to hear something different, even though if that means that I'm denying somebody's personal, objective life experience.
Right. To go back to just to make a point here, you guys were talking about the cars, and that's always been one of the dumbest things I've ever seen when it is introduced about Cuba. Well, look at all these amazing cars. And I'm like, yeah, but that's because countries like America, and this is going to piss off a lot of people on the right. I hope that it does. our trade embargoes to places like Cuba, places like Venezuela, places like Russia, for instance, or North Korea, whatever, it does not harm the people that run those countries. It harms the people that are enslaved by those governments. So we're doing this saying, oh, we're going to try to help these poor people. You are fucking killing them in the streets by doing this nonsense. This has been U.S. government policy for almost a century, and it's fucking ridiculous. Just my thoughts.
There's two things to that. One, it fucks up for the people that are there that can't get these items that they so need. But also, Cuba has the ability to buy things from other countries, China, Brazil. I mean, they have tons. So if they don't have the brand new Toyotas, that's really not America's fault. You know, it goes beyond the embargo, because yes, the embargo is shit, and we should totally eliminate it and stop that, because it really hurts people. They can't get soap, and they can't, you know, women can't get sanitary items, and etc. But it's beyond the United States, because all of those things can be bought from Europe or from South America or from anywhere else. They're made everywhere. So yes and no, but you know, it's not all the U.S.'s fault.
I'm not saying it's all the U.S.'s fault. Here. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
And I have a couple of questions for you guys. Do either of you know exactly which of the restriction of the so-called embargo, which by the way we know is the Helms-Burton Act passed by the U.S. Congress. Do either of you both know nowadays, 2021, which are the restrictions that are still in place?
No, not specifically. No, I don't.
Okay. So I love when we talk about this. I love when we talk about this subject. Obviously, like Martha was saying, the embargo have been used by the Cuban government for over 60 years as the blanket statement to blame the actual failed policies of central planning and socialist economy. That's a fact. Let's just put it out there and park it. Now, over the years, with all the administrations and the foreign policy in the United States, all the restrictions from the Helms-Burton Act have been loosened and loosened and loosened, to the point that nowadays in the United States, there is only two. And I would say 1.5. And the main one and the most important one is that, yes, the Cuban government can trade and engage in business with the United States and the United States companies, but they have to pay in cash. It has to be literally COD. They cannot be extended credit.
Wow.
Now, this is me, Maylin Salavarria, talking as a naturalized American citizen, and more important, as an American taxpayer. We all know, I'm pretty sure that we all know what we see about bailouts and government intervening with market forces and when companies fail and all that, right? Yeah. Me, right now, as an American taxpayer, I really don't want that restriction to go away, because I don't want a country that for 62 years have been rated as one of the worst payers by the Club of Paris and can trade with the entire world, both communist and capitalist economies. I don't want them to start doing a business with the United States in the state that this country has the economy, with inflation and with government meddling with market forces right now, on my dime. Why? Because we know how the story is going to end. They're not going to pay. And at some point, someone is going to come out with the savior's idea of a bailout. And at the end, who are the ones writing the check for that? Us.
Time out though, because I agree with you. The U.S. government should not be extending credit to Cuba. But if I, a personal citizen of this country, want to send product and pay for myself and maybe get paid back and maybe not, I should be able to.
Oh yeah, but now you can. You can. I mean, there are American cars being driven in Havana streets right now as we speak. So it's not only what you were saying about doing trade with European countries. It's like for medical supplies and medical equipments, the United States is the #1 provider of medical supplies and medical, medicines and things like that.
Imagine that.
They have huge contracts with food supplies providers for grain, seeds, and all that too. The fact that none of that affects or improves the Cuban government, again, is because it is a model of failed socialist economy and centralized planning that has been destroying the country for over 60 years now. But they are, like, the United States is the #2 provider of economy ranking, I forgot the name of it now, to Cuba, second only to what? to the remittances that the Cuban exiles, we the traders, send to the family that we have there. So that's how the regime is being sustained on a daily basis. So again, that's why I don't.
You're missing one there, though.
The whole
the drug trade is a very big way that they get their money.
Well, in the past, you're right. In the past 5 years, well, no, the drug has been going on since the 80s when the whole case with the General Ochoa came out, and lately it's been human trafficking as well. That's a big one too. So again, just to kind of like wrap it back to the whole idea of the embargo, that's another one that I don't buy, as I don't buy the free education, as I don't buy the free healthcare, because again, people don't, most Americans, at least in my experience that I have talked to, they don't even understand the origins of it. The origins of that act of Congress was to protect the private property of American citizens whose property was confiscated by Castro and they never received their legally due payment for it. I mean, either we stand with private property rights or we don't. I mean, I'm sorry, boys and girls, but there is no gray area in there. Okay, and whether governments and people want to manipulate it to feed their agenda, that's a whole different conversation. But that's the origin of the law, and that's the situation that we have right now. So no, the Cuban embargo should not be used as an excuse anymore. It's a very lazy one. We need to get a little bit more creative if they want to keep toting that Congo.
Let's talk about slavery in Cuba, because I think that slavery is something that we're not talking about, but you have family that are doctors, and doctors in Cuba are the #1 slaves.
Yes, they are. Actually, we have a very fancy term in English. It's called indentured servitude.
There you go. It makes it prettier. Nobody wants to be a slave, but an indentured servitude.
Exactly. So, and this has been happening in Cuba way since before I was born. They send professionals. It could be doctors, teachers. I mean, we have seen it happen in Venezuela, all over Africa, Bolivia. I mean, people, that's how I ended up living in the middle of the desert in Libya for 4 years when I was a child, because Castro gifted Gaddafi with a road from a little village in the middle of the Sahara Desert all the way to the border with Chad that could double down as a landing strip for Air Force jets. And my dad was an engineer working on that project. So yeah, I lived that up close and personal. Wow. They send the so-called missions with professionals. Probably 90% of those are going to be just agents of the government, you know, doing like ideological and political work. And then only 10% is actually going to be doing teaching or healthcare or construction or whatever. The Cuban government take their passports exactly as they do with the baseball players. And then get this. I mean, it's like the perfect business model if you were like a really greedy SOB, which is what I think of the Cuban government. They made the deals to send, let's say, doctors. Let's use doctors as an example. One of my cousins spent a few months in Bolivia doing this.
And in Brazil.
So it was the Bolivian government pays the Cuban health ministry, let's say $3,000 a month for that OB doctor to work in that village, right? The Bolivian Ministry of Health doesn't write a check directly to the doctor. Okay, are you following me?
Yeah.
It sends that to the Cuban government representative, and then the Cuban government representative pay that doctor $900, and they keep the rest.
And they say capitalism in America is bad.
If that is not the modern definition of indentured servitude and modern day slavery, I don't know what it is.
But it's better. I feel like, but wait, there's more, because you had obviously a level of privilege of some kind where you were able to travel with your father to Libya. Because the modern day, no, they take their passports and they must leave their family behind in Cuba, because that's what
happened to my cousin. So they have to leave. Let's say that they send the female doctor and then the husband and the kids stay in Cuba. And then she cannot cross to another country. She cannot come to the United States. At some point before Obama trashed the Cuban Adjustment Act, they were receiving some path to seek, refuge or asylum in another countries. All that went to hell in a basket case too. But then what the Cuban government is that then they hold their family in Cuba hostage. And then even if that doctor becomes, receive asylum in another country, becomes a naturalized citizen or permanent legal resident in another country, then the Cuban government doesn't let that person reunite with their family unless they jump in a boat and try to make it somewhere else. So again, and you were right. When I tell these stories to a lot of people, I need to tell them, I always have to make the disclaimer. You need to understand that 20 years after, we still don't understand how my dad got that lucky, that he said, if you want me to be in that project, I need to bring my wife and my kid with me. I was
nobody
one
else.
of two children in that camp that it was only for Cubans in the middle of the desert. That was not the norm. That was not the standard. And even in those cases, our passports were retained in the Cuban embassy in Tripoli. So we were not free to move around either. But then I need to understand people, you need to see that this was an exception to the rule. Back in the 80s, I went to Libya in 1980, and then I came back to Cuba in 1983, almost 84. So those were the years that I was mentioning before, that I was homeschooled when homeschooling was not even a thing.
Right.
But again, that was not the norm. Whoever got sent,
special.
many other times that my dad was sent to work in other countries, and we had to stay in Cuba. When my cousin was sent to Bolivia, her husband and her 2 kids had to stay in Cuba. And probably like your relative in Brazil, that's what they do.
Yep. And I think in his case, as a doctor, $900 seems like a lot of money. I believe their monthly salary is about $40. So they get paid slightly better a month to go to these countries, but they don't get paid $900 a
But
month.
again, like
$900 for the months that they were there.
But again, it's like when you put it in perspective, I always say that perspective is a great equalizer. When you put it in perspective, for someone that is living in sheer abject misery in Cuba, yes, $900 it's a lot. Yes, your relative and mine, they both know they're being enslaved. They're very smart people. They know they are enslaved, but they don't have any other choice. And unless I or somebody else can get them out of Cuba, that's the only way out they have around the regime to try to make a better one for their family, which kind of like sometimes ties me to the idea of these people that here in the United States or from like the comfort of their first world countries talk about, oh, we are outsourcing jobs and paying people $2 a day in Singapore to do my job. And I'm like, have you ever lived as a regular person in Singapore? Do you have any idea how big of a difference $2 or $3 a day can make for a person as opposed to the one that doesn't have it? Like when I was still in Cuba, when I was going to law school, I also work in tourism. And yes, sometimes I made in tips more money than what my dad as an engineer would make as a monthly salary, or more money than what my relative, who is an OB doctor specializing in fertility treatment, like super high rank in the in that field of medicine, way more than that she would make in a month salary, So again, perspective is a great equalizer.
So let's now derail the program and tell me about your views on child labor laws.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm a small business owner, right? And
tell me how you make your kids work.
My oldest son is a teenager. So yeah, and he's taller and stronger than me. So yeah, he's perfectly physically, mentally able and capable of working with me in the business. Because why not?
Do you pay him?
Of course, yeah. I would not pay. I would not work for free. I will never expect anybody to work for me for free. Again, that might be weird, but that's my ethics and my professional standards and the way that I conduct my business. With child labor, I think that is, people are just like completely disconnected. And there are very several things that play a role. Number one, when people talk about child labor, they're thinking about, Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer working in a coal mine, getting all back. I'm like, no, people, come on. Okay, let's get back to 2021 reality. Currently, first of all, it's part of the whole, overregulation of the economy and people choices and use of their businesses and their private property that it's being imposed on us by a government that is way too bloated and way too big. That's one part. The second part is that when we talk about child labor law, again, first world problems. People have like this I put my hands up in the air because I'm saving the kids. No, you're not doing nothing for the kids that are mining rare metals in Nigeria so you can have an iPhone in your hands or you can drive your fancy overpriced Tesla. So no, let's just put that out there. Nothing. I mean, this is just more stupid virtual signaling. I think that nowadays in the United States, for the most part, they're just only impacting small business owners and farmers and families that work in agriculture or whatever is the small business that they have running in the family that want to instill trades and apprenticeships and skills in their children. I mean, the article that we were just discussing not that long ago on Twitter about the girl that wanted to get a summer job in a flower shop. And the lady told her, no, we cannot hire you because the Labor Department regulation says that you cannot work here until you're 16 because you have to use scissors. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Government control schools are supposed to teach you how to use a scissor when you are in kindergarten. I mean, are we going to make the equivalence here, or just you guys as control freak regulators are exposing yourself just out of the blue like that? Again, so that's part of it, the way that it affects, especially in this post-corona circus situation in the United States with the labor shortage promoted by the government and their regulations with the whole stupid idea of paying people to stay home until obviously at some point the money is going to run out and we'll see what they're going to do. The printer is going to go nonstop, right? Yeah. So that's one part. And then the other one that is a big one for me, because again, I am mother, number one, and I am an immigrant to this country. It's like whoever comes to me, like with that idea of the virtual signaling, hands up in the air of child labors and this and all that, I always ask, okay, are you willing to sit down with me and are we going to talk about child sex trafficking? Are we talk about human trafficking? Are we going to address the real elephant in the room that in 2021 is hiding under child trafficking labor laws or regulations? I mean, are you going to grow the hair required to address that with your ever-ending growing regulatory state? Or we're not ready for that conversation yet?
Now, if we took all of the effort that we put into, labor regulation, and we took that effort and that money and put it into sex trafficking, we wouldn't have nearly the problem that we did. Exactly.
But and also 16-year-olds from working, 15-year-olds,
15 at 16. But even then, like, I don't know about everywhere. I would imagine Colorado's as strict or maybe even more strict than New Mexico where I live. But New Mexico, if you want to do an internship, say for a framing company or an electric company or HVAC company, you have to be at least 18 years old.
Really?
By law. Yeah, you're not allowed to do the internship until you're 18 years of age. And even then, there's quite a few restrictions. Most of those are put in place by the insurance side of things.
Restrictions, here in Colorado, we're here in Colorado with King Police, we're like the cherry on the top of, the closeted socialist toy utopia. But it's the same. And then they have hourly restrictions, like from 14 to 16.
Mm-hmm.
But then
you can only do like 3 or 4 hours a day or something.
Everything is just so out of reality, so out of touch, literally.
But
because there is already legislation against child abuse. There is already legislation against battery and assault. There is already legislation against murder. There is already labor regulations regarding accidents in the workplace and all that. I mean, and I think it's something that has come to light after this last year, again, because of all these, unconstitutional lockdowns and business, closing and the labor shortage. It's kind of like come out like on its own organically to demonstrate how these people that probably have never even ran a lemonade stand are sitting in an office.
Oh, they're not allowed to. They'll get arrested.
Regulating how do I have to conduct my business. I mean, do you think that if I was a contractor that was literally whipping minors in a job site doing painting or framing work, do you think the market would have allowed me to continue running my company or doing business? Do you think any client or any builder will hire me if I would do that? I mean, come on, people. Common sense is, again, just not that.
I mean, it depends. How much money do I save? Because I might hire you. I'm just,
she comes in with like really under cost because she has like a whole bunch of kids doing it for free. I mean, you might think twice about that.
You might. That's
the youngest one is too young.
I actually got suspended on Twitter one time for a week because someone said something about women in America make 77 cents on the dollar of men. And I said, that is not true. And I can prove it, because if it was true, I would only hire women.
Of course. Tell me a company that is exclusively women.
Yeah. That's
anyway.
It's so skewed because we women make the choice to stay home and take care of our kids or take time off to have these kids. That's
right. And also women do occupy a lot more of the jobs that are lower paying, teachers, nurses.
Because it gives us that flexibility that Martha is mentioning. So you cannot measure it in salaries run by the government systems. You need to measure it in the sweat labor that we individually and personally decide to put on those areas of our life that each one of us consider is the most important or the most relevant at that moment.
How many teachers do we know that decide to take a teaching job so that they're in school when their kids are in school and then they're kids at home? There's decisions that we make as mothers or future mothers in our careers, and we make it knowingly. I mean, it is what it is. We decide decisions. I don't think that we're worth less.
Well, and there's also,
if that was the case.
Yeah. But there's also an argument that women are less likely to ask for more than, guys will go in and say, hey, I've been doing this. You put extra work on me. I want to get extra pay. And if they say no, the guy will go, well, fuck off then. You know what I mean? Right. That'll happen. Women don't
What do you think
that.
about that, Martha? What do you think?
I agree. I think totally. I think that's something that we're like, can I please have a raise?
Yes.
No.
It's like, we want to be nice. And I got these funny stories. Like, I mean, it's not very common that you have a contractor, that you are a contractor. I mean, construction is a mostly male-dominated industry. And then it's kind of like funny because many, many times, and I have had the company for almost 7 years now, and my dad works with me, and most of my employees are men. I mean, we do have like a commercial cleaning branch services that we do, and granted, I have more girls working with me on that one, and I am owner operator, so I'm actually there with them on both. But it's kind of like funny because mostly on the commercial painting jobs, when we go and meet with clients and things like that, we're doing this and doing walkthroughs, and then if my dad or any of my lead painters is with me, you can see how immediately everybody just talk to them.
Yeah.
And then it's funny because after many of them have worked with me for many years, and I've always told them, we're gonna be nice with this, and then they just let them go. They let the client do all that explanation, and they're like, yeah, that's a good idea, but you need to ask her because she's the boss. And you see people's faces like, and I understand. I mean, I don't hold it against them. I understand it's not very common. But it's going back to what you say, is the way that we operate, that we want to be nice and this and that. I mean, if it was a man, it would probably just stop him right there and say, like, I'm the boss. You talk to me.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah.
The same happens to me all the time. It's like, no, I am. Sometimes I use it to my advantage. I had actually the government stop by my farm not too long ago, and they're like, can we get in? And I was like, no, you can't. And they're like, well, can you talk to the owner and ask them if we can get in? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
I use it to my advantage.
Exactly.
I love that they see my face and they're like, can we speak to the owner? They automatically, my name is on the title. They were coming to speak.
They automatically assume.
Yes,
automatic
sure.
system.
Give me a minute. I'll leave a post-it note for the owner on her desk, and
I'll ask. I'll get
she'll
back
call
to
you back. She'll call you back.
One of the things
What?
about that is, as we were talking about, well, I mean, I think it kind of works in the entire situation, from child labor to you running your own construction business, and how people will look past you. A lot of people say, oh, well, that's sexist or whatever. I think part of what's going on in America is because of things like child labor laws, because everyone's so worried about offending other people. We've essentially turned the majority of this country into a bunch of pussies.
Yes, I
You know,
cannot agree more. Yeah,
and
You're saying on me.
hard truth.
I'm just saying, if you even look, I don't support the military-industrial complex or anything, but you look at the fucking recruiting commercials now for like the Marine Corps and the Navy and the Air Force, whatever, all of it here in America, comparative to like when I'm a teenager, and comparative to what you have in like China or Russia or whatever, which those are a little different because they're like, well, join, we don't want to, too fucking bad, join, you know what I mean? But they've got to be laughing at us. Like, we really, what are we doing? You know, just all the things that like you go on Facebook or whatever, you can't even say. I mean, there are words that if you say them right now, us being live, it'll just shut down the whole thing. They'll just shut it off. And that's insane to me, you know?
I would never believe that. And this is something that, you know, depending on the day, sometimes it really hits me hard. Because sometimes I think, and this is a conversation that I have mostly with my oldest one, that we talk and we discuss about what's going on around us in the past 15 years. And I'm like, sometimes I can't believe that I left my entire life behind in Cuba. I made the decision to start my life with 2 suitcases and $200 in my pocket. When I left Havana airport, I didn't know in which country I was going to be able to land. And I remember my mom, and I'm a single child of my mom and my dad. I remember my mom, halfway law school, was the one of those days that I came home venting out about those discrepancies and absurdities that I was mentioning to you both earlier. That it was my mom, the one that told me, you need just, duct tape your mouth, bite your tongue, and just finish and graduate. And you need to get the hell out of here. My mom told me, you need to leave. Because if you decide to practice law in this country, you're going to end up in jail with whoever is the one that you're trying to represent. She knew that my vocation or my inclination was going to be mostly litigation or criminal law. So that was number one. Number two, the day that I left Cuba, in the airport, I remember my dad is a man of very few words. Totally the opposite of me. As we were walking out, how feelings and emotions start getting, really, really high. And I remember that he grabbed me over here and he get his face like really close to mine. And he told me, you're going to turn around and you're going to walk through that hallway and you're not going to look back, because here you don't have any future. And I am his only child.
Wow. That's insane.
Well, fast forward the time to 2021, and I have this conversation with my teenage kid, and I am Nicolas. That's his name. He likes to be called Nick now. And I'm the only one that calls him Nicolas. Nicolas Alavarria Rodon, you're in trouble. Anyway, I have this conversation with him, and I'm like, I cannot believe that your father and I made this decision 20 years ago in the hopes to give you all a better future. I always said when I was in Cuba and I got married there the first time, I'm not going to have children here, because for this misery with me, it's more than enough. I am not going to bring to life an innocent child to be born and raised in this disaster. And I was blessed and lucky that I had the chance of leave. How many of my friends and my peers and many people that were born after me are still stuck in there? And then I come to the United States, and again, fast forward time 20 years, I cannot believe the red flags that I have been seeing left and right all around me. way before my children were born. Obviously, and Martha probably knows this now, after you have kids, everything is taken to a whole new level. I cannot believe that the same thing that I ran away from, that the same thing that I escaped in pursuit of not only my own happiness, but a better future for my kids, is actually materializing around me nowadays in this country. And granted, you don't need a Messiah, you don't need a Castro to did overnight what they did in Cuba, but in here it's been happening like the proverbial frogs in the boiling water. It's been happening little by little, decades by now. And then when we try to call the red flags, then we're the crazy Cuban. And we are the extremists.
I'm okay being the crazy Cuban. My father was a crazy Cuban in Venezuela before there were Cubans in Venezuela. I mean, it was his nickname in Venezuela because back then there were no Cubans. Yeah. So he was El Cubano. And he would go around and tell people, I've seen this before. Mm-hmm. This is going to happen.
Yeah, they should have listened to him.
People are like, are you crazy? This is Venezuela. We're the richest country in America.
It's very discouraging some days. Again, personally, I try to live my life in a very positive way, because it's the only way that we Cubans learn how to survive, making fun of ourselves, dancing, and et al. So those are survival skills that I already acquired, that I myself applying them here now. So that aside, sometimes you have days where you think about, okay, nobody's leaving the United States to go to North Korea or Venezuela or Cuba. It's like, come on, people, let's compute this the right way. The traffic is the other way around. We have like, how many? Was it 20 people landing in Key Biscayne over Memorial Weekend, even though we don't have a Cuban Adjustment Act anymore. Over social media, we have the Venezuelans that are crossing the river to make it all the way to the United States after they have made the trek through Central America and Mexico. Like, come on. Like I was telling my son the other day, where the hell are we gonna go from Colorado in a homemade raft? There is no place to go, people. Come on, like, wake up. Yeah. Does that mean that I'm blind about the United States? Hell no. That's why everybody calls me an equal opportunity rabble rouser. I'm going to call people bullshit left and right until the day I die.
What are those red flags you see? Because I think this is an important point. I think that there's an important point to make here, that most Americans don't see the red flags that we see.
Well,
so what are they?
The red flag, I mean, it's not even a flag anymore. It's like a freaking blanket over a football stadium. It was the year 2020 and the whole COVID-19 circus. I mean, if that doesn't shake people's completely, then I don't know who
or what will, right?
Well, one of the things that I noticed in 2020, especially, and even a little into 2021, but when all this nonsense started, you had a lot of people making jokes or whatever, not jokes, but making comparisons to Cuba, to Venezuela, to the Jews in Nazi Germany in World War II. And then people go, that's ridiculous. That'll never happen in America. And I'm like, they just locked you in your fucking house for a year and told you you're not allowed to go to work.
And then you're not essential. Wait,
and you're not essential. They're basically telling you you're not essential. Shut up.
So many parallels this last year, you guys. But even before, like the way that the regulatory state has grown in the United States in the past decades, the way that not only business are controlled, again, not through votes, not through elections, no revolutions, no, it's like silent regulations passed by government wankers who have never run a lemonade stand, okay? So let's just say how it is. The way that they are controlling the so-called public education. It's not public education, people. Come on, let's call shit what it is. It's government-controlled schools. Okay? Let's just be the adults in the room and call things exactly what they are. There is no need to engage in mental gymnastics.
They even control public schools, because
exactly
you can't send your kids to a public school that is not somehow under the purview of the government.
Exactly.
They control the curriculum even there.
Might have a little bit of leeway in a charter school.
You mean private schools?
Private
control the curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, you might have a little bit more leeway, like in a religious school, a private school, a charter school, but it's like that goes in the background, is always there. So all that was already happening way before. we hit the corona circus of 2020. And then, like you were saying, Austin, you have the government, you have an unelected little man with a huge Napoleonic complex, basically ruling this country. And then nobody has the balls to ask any questions. And I'm like, when did we all became eunuchs? Because I never signed up for that.
That's not accurate. It's the problem is the people that did have the balls to ask questions were silenced. Were kicked off YouTube, kicked off Twitter, kicked off Facebook, not allowed to speak anymore. They're like, you don't go against our narrative.
So going back to the red flags, it was a combination of things. So it was not only rendering to a centralized power, because that's exactly what happened. It's the combination with censorship. It's like the psych up and the mental campaign that, oh, you're going to kill grandma. It's like the symbolism of if you don't wear a mask, you are the bad person. No, because that's how I grew up in Cuba with the schools. If you didn't wear the red pañoleta around your uniform in your neck, like Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, you know, in their religion, they don't follow symbols and things like that. And I remember having classmates in a school in Cuba. They were ostracized. They were bullied both by students, teachers, and school administrators because of that. Same thing happened now with the stupid mask, but in English and with Wi-Fi and social media. You have Corona Karens popping out left and right, and there is not even freaking science behind it.
Well, there was science behind it, but it was science behind the opposite, but you were shut down if you said it.
So exactly, you have the censorship, you have the manipulation of information, you have the corporate media, media in the United States, and this is a former newspaper reporter speaking here. There is a reason why I'm not in a newsroom anymore, because orange is not my color, so I just have to find another path in life, you know? The corporate media in this country is completely bought and sold out. I mean, there is no power in this country anymore. So you have exactly the same combination that creates this perfect storm to control and infringe on people's liberties and freedoms, exactly the same way that Castro had a perfect storm in Cuba from 1965 to 1959. I mean, when you look at it objectively, from a standpoint of principle, of proper role of government, of individual freedom, it is exactly the same model. And whoever doesn't want to see it like that is just choosing to be blind.
Yeah. The thing about it that I think a lot of people struggle with is they look at places like Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela, and they go, yeah, but they have a dictator. And I go, but socialism doesn't matter whether it's under a dictator or an oligarchy, which is what we have in America. We have these morons that have been elected to Congress or the Senate for like they got there on a fucking Tyrannosaurus Rex. They've been there 8,000 years. They never get thrown, you know, they have to die in order not to be reelected. It's insane, you know.
Because we don't have term limits. They have made politics their career. Yeah.
Right. And then you, like you were saying, you got these faceless bureaucrats that really do most of the work. I mean, overall, they're back in some room with their little golem telling Dr. Fauci what he's allowed to say, whatever. That's really what's going on. It's insane to me.
Are unelected, so we have no idea what their agenda is.
Like Dr. Fauci, who we found out recently is the highest paid federal employee, making something like $417,000 a year. That little gremlin should have been terminated back in the 80s when he screwed up with the whole AIDS.
Exactly. Yes, he should have.
But there's very little accountability in government. And Dr. Fauci was also involved with the research in Wuhan. No, he had some level. Let me not even go there because we don't need this program shut down. But
I know, right? It's like what's the difference between a conspiracy theory and a fact? What?
I'm not gonna
6 months on social media before we start seeing it.
Yeah, I'm not going to say, that virus came out of the Wuhan lab. I mean, I won't say that's what happened. I also won't say it didn't come out of a wet market. But if you have a coronavirus and then it like suddenly starts taking over and people go, well, it came out of that wet market. And across the fucking river, they're studying it. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's that much of a leap to go,
It doesn't take a massive scientist.
That was the subject of Stephen Colbert and who's the other comedian that was on his show that he's like, the name of the virus
is on the building.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you know,
That was John
Virus.
Stewart. John
Yeah.
Stewart went after him, and it
there
was
is,
hilarious.
and just like a side note, there is a series in Netflix that is made by Televisión Española. Obviously, it can be dubbed and subtitled in English. In Spanish, it's called La Valla, and then in English, it's called The Barrier. They're only in season 1, but boy, it's timely perfectly to what's going on in here. And
The
it's,
barrier.
if you guys watch it, you're gonna see how it ties up almost perfectly to every single topic that we have been talking about today.
Well,
And
I'll have to check
again,
that out.
sometimes, yeah, they call it what, dystopian realities and utopian novels and things like that. But just look at, I don't know, from the years when Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged to the word in 2021, are things that dystopian anymore or not? So
I mean, look at The Handmaid's Tale. I don't know if you watched that show, but they even had at one point on the show, they had the women wearing muzzles.
mhm.
And then they were playing that as 2020 started. It's like,
I don't believe in coincidence, you know. Yeah.
One of the things that I did notice, and I found this odd, I guess you look for, you see what's around you in a lot of cases, but a lot of those medical shows like Grey's Anatomy or all the doctor shows, right? The late night, or I'm not late night, but evening shows, they all film, a year before these things come out, right? Because then they got to film everything, and then they market it, and they whatever. And almost fucking every one of them, in like right when the season was supposed to start in 2020, there was a pandemic in every one of them. And it's like they shot this a year ago. You know what I mean? So it's like,
had
that's
a
just weird.
pandemic training or whatever right before this happened. I mean, now that we know what we know, it's not that big of a coincidence, to be honest.
It's no. And then when you are someone like, for example, like me, that I work in hospitals for 10 years, like that thing with the mask and all that, I was just looking at it, I'm like, okay, I mean, is this a battle that I really want to pick with my neighbor or my family or whatever? But I work in a hospital, and N95 masks have to be fitted, to your face. When you go into an OR, what you're trying is not to spit or put your body fluids into the patient that has an open wound and things like that. Like, this is stupid. And I am not even a graduate from medical school. How come nobody in this country, how many millions of people we have in here, how come nobody is seeing that? The censorship was another thing that was a big hit for me.
Say it.
Because the minute that people started, including medical professionals, they started talking about alternative treatments, they were banned by the government. Since when the government has the right to decide what pill I take or not?
Oh, but wait, because now you're talking into drug legalization. They apparently have all the rights.
Exactly. Yeah. No, they don't. I never consented to that.
I agree with you. They don't.
And again, medical freedom and informed consent has been trashed to the dumpster fire in this country for a very long time. But this past year has been the cherry on the top. And moreover, myself working in healthcare as an interpreter, if you think that what is happening to you, the average white American in the United States, is outrageous, you guys just don't want to see what happens in the medical office when the patient have an English barrier, when it has a language barrier, when an interpreter has to relay an information from a doctor that is already biased and tainted. And you don't want to see how parents sign consents for interventions and procedures where they don't have all the information. For crying out loud, it has happened to me with my own parents, and I work on it. It is beyond outrageous. And I truly hope that at some point, justice has to be made at some point, because it is impossible that us as humanity can continue to go on without people being held responsible for atrocities like this.
I have to ask you a question, because you're touching on something sort of related, but as a Cuban, are you racist? Because I get this all the time. You're Cuban, so you must be racist. So,
well, you know what? I think that we have like a whole 50 shades of offenses for Cubans. I have been told, and these are true stories, I have been told that I am, but you're too white to look like a real Latina. I'm like, really? How are Latinos supposed to look like? I have been told, like, I have been sitting in a lunchroom reading, I will never forget, a Rolling Stones magazine. And I have had coworkers approaching me and say, "Oh, what are you reading?" And then I show them the article. "Oh, you're reading a magazine in English?" And I'm like, "Dude, how the hell do you think I got a master's from an American university if I didn't know how to read in English?" Or depending on where I live in town, "Oh, do you live in, I don't know, so and so? So you're in that area of town where they have all the Mexican restaurants and the Mexican markets, with the fresh chiles and jalapenos." And I'm like,
I'm Cuban. We don't eat that.
I'm Cuban. I don't eat hot peppers. Why do you ask?
I love when I tell people I don't eat hot, spicy food, and they're like,
things like that. And then
"You're
I have to explain the difference between spices and hot, as in spicy hot, things like that. So it basically depends on who I am offending that day. It might be whether I'm called a racist or not, or the shade of racism where I am in that day.
But we're Cuban, so we must be racist.
Exactly. Yeah. We have been in cartoons in the New York Times and the Washington Post making fun of Cuban Americans and all that. So we're kind of like used to it. We just have the hard skin to survive that BS now. It just doesn't affect us that much anymore.
I mean, there is still racism in Cuba, which does prove that you can have socialism, because socialism is a great equalizer, right?
No, pero eso no se toca, niña, Caquita.
But there's very few people of color in the Cuban government.
That's the conversation about racism that people look at me with the deer in the headlight look, and I'm like, okay, I get it. You're not ready for that conversation yet. So you want to approach racism and discrimination from your privileged first world problems point of view, and you want to use socialism and a society brainwashed onto Marxism as the example. Come on, kid, you got some reading to do, okay? Because in Cuba, over 95% of the prison populations are Black. The Cuban society is still, after 62 years, inherently very stereotypes against Blacks, and we're all mixed. In Cuba, 90% of the population is mixed. We have this saying that says, "El que no tiene de Congo, tiene de Carabalí." You either Congos and Carabalís were the two main tribes from Africa where the Spaniards brought the slaves. So at some point, when you run the 21 ancestry, whatever is the genetical test, you can bet your rear end that you're going to have one or the other. We're all mixed, right?
I agree. Totally.
When you look at the government, when you look at the elites of the military, the Communist Party, the government, the companies that now run the businesses for tourism, how many Black people do you see there?
None.
I mean, you probably have extra fingers if you try to count them with only one hand. Like even in tourism, when I was working there in hotels and tourism, bartenders, waiters, whoever was the employee, there were very few Blacks. And then the few that made it, they were always like the good looking one for whoever was the concept of good looking that was making the decision. But again, our privileged first world Americans are not ready for that conversation yet. They're not.
You're right. Everybody in Cuba has, if the American definition of being Black was the one drop of blood, everybody in Cuba.
I mean, even in this country, probably if you run genetic ancestor tests, everybody's going to have the same mix. So it's just like the most stupid thing to try to continue perpetuating the old divide and conquer. Why? Because as you and I are fighting to see who looks more quemadita today, those freaking government wonkers are increasing their power and infringing in our liberty even more. But again, not many people are ready for that conversation yet. So you either address stereotyping and racism and discrimination head on, or you don't.
I agree. And there's racism in socialism. So socialism doesn't cure the problem. So that's the cure, because they give us that as a solution. It's you want to cure this, then we can't have businesses giving jobs. We need socialism. Everything has to be owned by the workers. Well, guess what? That doesn't solve the problem either.
Yeah,
As
in places,
years of
where everything is owned by the government, like Cuba, you still have that. Places like China, you have ethnic minorities being thrown in concentration camps. So no, all this new crap of the critical race theory, this is just like like all this new theory of something that have been in the books since Marx was writing with angels and all that is just a repackaging of the same Marxism ideology with a new PR campaign where people auto-elected to those holier than you positions have the guts to come to you and me and tell us, no, because you are Latina, you're not going to succeed. You're too stupid to govern yourself. You're too stupid to run a business. You're too stupid to compete in the market and run your company. You're too stupid or unable to know what's going to be the best school for your children. You're too idiot to get an ID, or you don't know how to go to vote. Like, who the hell gave you permission to do that? Who are you? You don't know me. You don't know.
And here we are, two Latinas who run our own businesses, who made it out of poverty. I mean, like you said, you came here with $200. My parents left Cuba without a dollar in their pocket, and yet we've survived. Exactly. So how do they put us into this category of you are too stupid when we are the prime examples of we're not?
I think there is a combination of what is going on in public schools in this country for many years. That's why younger generations believe that idiocy so easily. It's a combination with that, and a combination with this constant eroding of individual self-governance, to eroding constantly the power of what an individual can do. Yeah, if you make stupid choices, you're gonna get stupid solutions. But if you don't, then you have a path to success. And I don't need anybody to give me a little group or put me in a little label to tell me where I can be successful or not. The only thing that I need is like equal protection under the law, and to conduct my business and my life as free as I can in the way that I see fit. And as long as I am not sinking anyone else's boat, I should be able to do that, because that's what the United States was built upon. That's the whole reason why many people like your parents and myself are in this country today. So again, I don't know who gave the authorization for that. I never gave mine, so I'm never going to apply with that as idiocy at all. So
I love it. So what made you be a libertarian? Because, in my experience, the vast majority of Cubans are Republicans.
Well,
so, how did you find them? Because it's so hard to find the libertarian.
I actually don't even concern myself. I mean, even if you look at nowadays standards, and I'm a mod. I would not pass any of the libertarians' purity tests according to nowadays circus. So I actually don't even put myself in any labels. I here and there, I call myself mostly like a conservatarian or something like that. I am literally a free agent. I am an equal opportunity rabble rouser, because I will call bullshit on everybody and their mother and then some more. I follow principles.
Yes.
I follow principles. I don't follow tribes. I was born and brainwashed in a tribe. There is no way in hell that I left Cuba to come to the United States or any other part of the world for that matter to continue doing the same, because that would be the definition of insanity. So no, it's not going to be like that. And I think that the whole mix with libertarian, being more libertarian, or a mix of conservative and libertarian, is basically because I do follow these principles of small government, of individual freedom, of very limited role for the state. And I think that as I get older, I'm just like becoming more and more anarchist. It's like, don't give me any shit. I just want to blow up everything and just leave me the fuck alone type of thing, But again, you always find like some things that you align the most. I would say for the most part, mostly libertarian. Again, we're talking here about political philosophies. We're not talking about party affiliations. Okay. Right. I'm not okay with any of the circuses, none of them. And that's the way I see them right now. And still, I get trouble with everybody. For some things, I am too conservative. From another ones, I am too libertarian. So I'm just, conduct my own circus on a daily basis and just try to be happy with it.
I agree with that philosophy. Pretty, following a team regardless. If the Libertarian Party put up somebody that was not following, what I believe, I wouldn't vote for them either. It's not
You mean like Bill Weld?
Let's not get started. Or, we can go further back. Our bar was swell. Wayne Allen Root was his running mate.
Yeah.
Swell.
That's
His initials were war.
Speaking of libertarian philosophy or anarchist philosophy, one of the major sticking points that I've consistently had with the Libertarian Party as their overall is border control, right? The open or closed border. Martha and I were discussing while we were waiting for you that I would like to see our immigration policy returned to the feet dry situation with people like it from Cuba, or essentially if you're coming from essentially if you're coming from a plantation nation, right, a slave nation, I have no issue with these people just going, hey, welcome, what's your name? We need to know your name, basically. That's all, right? As far as people that are, we do have this situation at the southern border now where during their interviews, and they'll actually interview them. There was one guy, not even making it up. They said, what makes you want to come to America? And he said, I miss Buffalo Wild Wings. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. I'm not even kidding. Not even kidding. I watched this thing. Watched this thing. And I was like, okay, all right. Okay, first of all, Mexico City has Buffalo Wild Wings. So you don't need to come to America to get it, right? But this was a Mexican national. Now, I have no problem with immigration at all.
That's too funny.
But when you have people coming from Venezuela, from Colombia, from Cuba, from all these places, if they can get out of North Korea somehow, right? Mm-hmm. Then I think that's just automatic that, the whole beacon on the hill thing or whatever, that we should welcome those people, not put them through a whole bunch of nonsense shit that we put them through, whatever, immigration, Yeah. But I don't have an issue with stopping people at the border and at least asking their name. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have an issue with that.
We have millions of people in this country. We have no idea who they are because our policies are so stupid that we don't even do that.
Exactly. I have traveled in Europe too. Anywhere you go, you have some sort of control like that. Nations would not exist in the history of mankind, if something like that was not in place. And whoever pretends that can be otherwise is just not living in reality. There has to be, but like you said, Austin, there has to be like a process in the middle where you literally screen people and who's coming in, who's coming out, and what are the reasons behind. There has to be a process in place for people who have a chance to make it here. They have to be a process that has to be less bureaucratic. But then we're talking about, again, the government controlling things in the only way they know how to control things. There is no immigration policy based, for example, on market forces, where I can hire my painters in Mexico if I know that I like them. They're going to be better. They're going to be faster than the ones that I have here and don't want to work. Why? Because you have then the combination of this welfare state and all these unemployment benefits, to go back to 2020, where people don't have the motivation to work and to get ahead and to hustle anymore. And then if that's the case with the labor market that I have here, why can I not get my labor forces for my company somewhere else? But then the process is just too cumbersome. So the same government regulation is promoting a black market solution for the labor needs of this country. And it's happening not only in the United States, other countries too.
They come here because they find the jobs. If it wasn't it's so easy for them to find jobs, they wouldn't be coming here. But also we need them. I think that the whole our whole immigration policy is set on this idea that we don't need immigration. That is why it's controlled.
This country was founded on that. Yeah,
we need immigration. We need a workforce. We need people to come here. We want them to come here. And the government bureaucracy makes it very difficult. But also, it keeps people here. How many people wouldn't want to come to this country, work for 6 months, and go home? to live the way they want to live, rather than being stuck in this country. And then they bring in their entire family. So now we have to educate their children, and we have to cover the expenses when they get sick, and we have to vaccinate their kids, and we have to do all these things. If you just allowed people to come and work, they'd go home.
But then the whole process to get those H work visas is a nightmare. It's a freaking nightmare.
It is.
And you have the powers that be that keep promoting this welfare state that is like, they're golden eggs goose, because they want to cap into those people because they see them as potential voters too. They're not analyzing the entire picture the way that you two and I are doing it now, from a standpoint of just, a moving or a mobile labor market as it should be, and it has been many times in the history of mankind before, as long as you have the right streamlined process in place. But we don't have that because there are many people left, right, in the middle, and everybody and their mother benefiting from the circus that we have right now.
Right. To the point of the migrant workers, first of all, I think that's an excellent idea where those people can come, work for the summer, put a bunch of money in their pocket, go home. They live better in their home country with the money that they take back. I think that's a good thing. But I was actually on a panel, and someone had mentioned that migrant workers take work from Americans. And I laughed, like literally laughed out loud, because I was like, no, they don't. That's ridiculous, right? And the guy said, he goes, no, that's true. And I said, okay, who's going to go pick tomatoes for a penny a pound? Name one American that just, come on. And he goes,
we haven't had migrants working in the fields. I have a farm. I drive past all these tomato fields. And this past crop season, they all were rotting on the vine. They couldn't get workers to come in and pick those tomatoes. So I haven't checked prices at the supermarket.
I don't know if it's a penny a pound now. But my point is that this person,
it's crazy.
This person said you could hire Americans to do it.
Yeah, I have real life stories hiring labor to work in construction with me.
Yeah.
And I have tried people that are not immigrants. And guess what? They don't last 90 days on the job. They don't want to take apprenticeships. They want to have the benefits and the salary of a CEO with 30 years of experience, when the only thing that they have done is probably flip burgers in McDonald's. No offense to whoever starts there. People don't understand the concept of an entry-level position. They don't understand the concept of apprenticeship. They don't understand the concept of being on trial and test for 90 days until, the owner of a small business know if you have the potential to get ahead in the company or not, because everybody has this other idea that the government law is going to give me minimum wage and is going to give me these benefits. And it only tells me that people have been failing at math since forever, because the math doesn't add up. And this is a conversation that I have had with many people here when they tell me that. And then I say, are you going to come and work with me as an apprenticeship doing commercial painting for this, and this? And then they look at me like, well, no. Then right there you have the answer to your question.
Speaking of
here, I'm just being a business owner trying to fulfill my needs for labor. Are you going to do it or not?
Right. This morning, I saw an article that said that there are 10.2 million vacant jobs in America right now. I'm sure the number's probably actually higher than that, but that's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. That's a lot. And one of the things is that these people keep saying, well, if these companies would pay a living wage, which, by the way, doesn't mean anything. That's just a made-up term that has no definition. But let me ask you this, and I think I know how you'll answer. If we abolished the minimum wage, none of those jobs would be vacant.
Oh, absolutely not. Everybody would be working. I mean, even if they tried to cook up the statistics, there would not be vacant. There would not be a labor shortage in the United States right now. Well, and that's the other thing is like in my head, in my crazy Cuban thoughts, when I am, stuck in traffic on I-25, I think of stuff like this, like who gave like this obscure bureaucrat in the Department of Labor, who gave him the right to rule how can I negotiate the value of my labor? My labor is my private property. Show me the paper where I signed it up to you. I didn't anywhere.
As a teenager, I worked for Walmart, and I have to say that I know people shit on Walmart, and Walmart is blah, 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 but it was great for me as a 16-year-old because they gave me an opportunity to work. But beyond that little thing, I was making $5 the hour, and I was happy to make it because I was learning something or another about the labor market. Teenagers need a place to start.
Right.
But beyond that, there were these wonderful things. I'm aging myself here, but they used to go to a Walmart before, and there was a greeter at the door. Usually it was a retired person or it was somebody with some sort of handicap. And these people were paid, whatever, probably $5, the same I was being paid, but they were great. You'd show up and they'd be like, hi, what are you looking for? Oh, that's over there. Go find it over there. Or you're returning, come here. It was a friendly welcome. Those people are the people that have been affected by the minimum wage. Nobody's going to pay $12 an hour, $15 an hour to somebody standing outside. Hi, welcome to Walmart. And so, when we look at that minimum wage, we have to look at the true people that are affected by the minimum wage. And that is the people that can't make that their labor just isn't worth.
It's destroying the low income family and the low income worker in America. It's the same.
Well, and it's worse than that.
Same example that I gave you. Whoever comes with these ideas are these peoples with this holier than you mentality and first world problems mentality that from the comfort of their $1 million house are deciding how a person that doesn't have skills, that is entering the labor market for the first time, that has a handicap, like you said, that is a recent immigrant, how they are supposed to live their life. Nobody gave them that right. Nobody. And the more regulations they put, the more they are affecting, again, the low-income families, the recent immigrants, the unskilled labor market that they so-called are trying to protect. So it's all a stupid virtue signaling that doesn't pass any common business management analysis that you want to do around it. It doesn't pass it. It just doesn't pass the test.
Who would have thought that electing people who have never run businesses to decide how your business is going to be run?
I know, right?
Imagine that. Imagine that idea. But Austin, we have been going for almost 2 hours.
I know. I was about to say that.
Oh my God.
I was about to say that we're going to need to wrap it up because we've been going for almost 2 hours. And
nobody watches 2-hour shows, people.
No, but unless it's Joe Rogan. I mean, he might be the only one that can pull it off. But it was awesome. The 2 hours flew right by, so that always means that at least I had fun.
So. Me too. I'm so glad. I just feel that I'm not that alone anymore.
We're not alone. There are more of us. They're just not as vocal as us.
It's a very good feeling. So
they're just not as vocal as we are. We're Cuban and we're women and we have a point and we're gonna make it. I
don't care. You have some explaining to do.
Right on. I really appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you co-hosting, Martha. Let's start with our guest here. Is there anything that you want to shout out? I've got your Twitter down in the description for people to follow you and listen to your spicy takes. Is there any webs or do you have any podcast or anything that you do or anything you want to shout out?
No, I'm kind of actually starting to work in a project right now, but it's still in the drafting stage. So hopefully it's going to be something very similar to what we have done today. And I have kind of put out in my Twitter some of the one that I have done with some people that I know already, and it has been this same format. So we're trying to replicate the same, where we're going to be talking mostly about pop culture, politics and individual rights. And then my idea is that we want to put a little segment in Spanish, because I am a firm believer. I don't buy the whole thing of that immigrants and Latinos have to be progressive when they come in the United States. And for 20 years, I have been calling on them on why, once that you are able to vote, why do you vote in the United States for the same government control failed policies that promoted corruption and made you leave your country to begin with? So I do believe there is a space in there. So I'm kind of working into this, trying to think into a radio talk show with a little segment in Spanish and doing the same simultaneous podcast. So if you follow my Twitter account, those things will be coming out in there. we just don't have a timeline yet because we're just in the drafting stages of it.
Right on.
But it'll
I
be
look forward
there.
to that.
Don't follow Mei-Ling. Please follow her on Twitter.
I am
She's great.
Cuban's Galt Mami on Twitter. So if you go there, that's where we're going to be putting out any updates regarding that. So that's basically what I'm trying to do regarding these kind of like speaking engagements and just, ruffling feathers left and right as much as I can. Other than that,
That's
it's just
awesome.
continue running my business, taking care of my parents, homeschooling my youngest one. I'm trying not to go insane in the process.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
I look forward to that. I'll definitely be following and ready to watch or listen or whatever when you get that up and going. Martha, our beautiful Cuban co-host here, she has an amazing YouTube show and podcast that's all in Spanish.
All in Spanish and all in English. So I do one in English for the Libertarian Party, which is Latin Libertarians, and then we do for People for Liberty now, Libertarios Hispanos, which is all in Spanish. And Mei-Ling, I'm going to send you a message because I really want you to come and chat with me and Zach.
Actually, I'm gonna check the format too, because in this drafting process that we still don't have like a clear idea of how we know we want to include both languages, but we still haven't decided.
We do straight Spanish on one side, straight English in another. Believe it or not, there's not that many people on the internet that speak both. I don't know what the deal is here. We're used to Miami where everybody speaks both languages.
Yeah, but I am in Colorado. I mean, you probably have like 5 Cubans here, and then if you want to have a Cuban coffee, you're sure it's probably gonna be my house.
Make it at home. And of course, awesome. I'm running for office in Miami, so
good luck with that. Yeah,
thank you. I need all of the help I can get since we know how things are here. Yeah, but that's about it. That's what we're promoting.
Awesome. Martha's podcast is also in the description below, as well as her Twitter handle. So definitely follow her. Help her out if you can with her run there in Miami. I think it'd be hilarious to have her as Miami-Dade County commissioner. I just think it'd be funny. That's some shit I'd watch on TV for sure. So,
give this Juanita some. Yeah, the soapbox to be able to stand up there and tell people how it really is.
Awesome. Ladies, I really appreciate it. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. Follow both these ladies, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Thank you.